MCB4 has adopted a hybrid meeting policy whereby we will meet both in person and virtually. All community board committee meetings will require an in-person quorum to come to order and conduct business. Board members are expected to attend meetings in person unless they have a disability or an extraordinary circumstance as defined by the New York State Open Meetings Law. Excused committee members and members of the public will still be able to participate virtually. Committee members who are joining via Zoom must leave their cameras on. We encourage members of the public to join virtually. The MCB4 hybrid policy can be found on our website. Tonight's meeting is still being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube. And in addition to the live stream, it will be on our YouTube channel to go back and take a look at anytime. Okay. Why don't we jump right into it? And Janine, just so you know, Lowell's here. I think we have quorum.
Okay. Well, we needed 11 in person to have quorum, and then the virtual count. So right now we technically don't have quorum.
Yeah, maybe.
Let's start because we don't want to keep Stephanie another month and an hour. So Stephanie, why don't you start us off? Stephanie is speaking on behalf of Comptroller Brad Landers' office, and she's presenting on NYC Climate Dashboard. So we are happy you're here with us, and thank you for your patience last month. We're sorry that went a little long, but you know, parks details always can get a little hairy. But thank you so much for coming again in December, and the floor is yours.
I'm absolutely glad to be here. And yeah, I guess part of the whole reason of this this board is to go over those details. So completely understandable that the meeting went long, and I'm glad that there's a lot of passion for parks in this committee. I actually recently talked to one of the members of the staff of Brad Hoylman, who said this is the best community board in the city. So I'm gonna hold his recommendation to that.
I think you say that to all the boards. You say that to
I'm
all the
sure he
boards.
does, but he doesn't have a reason to say that to me, who lives in Community Board 1 in Brooklyn. Yeah, okay. So I was asked to do a kind of an abbreviated version. So I'm really just going to kind of introduce you to the basics of this dashboard. I guess first introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Cox. I'm the strategic organizer for climate and environmental justice at the New York City Comptroller. I work with the climate team, which is based in our policy bureau. There's a couple of us that work on policy, infrastructure, and transportation issues. And that's separate from our investments team, where we also have a separate ESG team who works on climate issues. So let me share my screen real quick, and I'll bring you into the dashboard. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can in the room.
Great. Hold on. Technical difficulties. All right, figured it out. All right. So if you go to our website, you can go to services. You go down to New York City Climate Dashboard, and it brings you to this useful tool. So this is the New York City Climate Dashboard. Basically what it is, it's basically a one-stop shop for all things climate data. Has anyone in the room heard of New York City Open Data? I actually can't see the room right now, but I see that there's one person in the Zoom that's raising their hand. So if you're familiar with New York City Open Data, you probably know that it is a very useful tool for getting open data from New York City if you have to be an expert on Excel or GIS, which of course most people are not. What we wanted to do is we wanted to take information from that and some other public-facing sources and bring that into a way that's usable and digestible for everyday people to use in their advocacy, their activism, and their research. So we made it into this little dashboard. This is the landing page. It goes over a couple different things about what climate change means for New York City. Also talks about our goal of 80% reductions in greenhouse gases by 2050. But yeah, it's just kind of a landing page. We have a couple different pages that are all kind of interactive and full of different kinds of data. Let's go ahead and start with energy. I know there's a pretty small team here today. If anyone has a question at any time, please feel free to interject. I can't actually see the room, so whoever is controlling the audio for the room, please just feel free to interrupt me when someone has a question. Yeah, so we'll start here. This is our energy page. We have a couple different things on this page. First thing we have is we have a showing of what our energy mix looks like in New York City. So you can see from this, our energy mix, pretty dirty. We mostly utilize oil and gas. The vast majority of what we use actually is gas. It says dual fuel, but usually dual fuel systems burn on gas. So if you look at this, you also see that there's a little bit of hydro, a little bit of nuclear, very little bit of zero emissions things. So naturally, if we're trying to get our grid to be decarbonized by 2050, then we need to make sure that we're actually greatly changing what's in this grid. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. One of the things we can do is we can build more transmission projects. The state is currently working on a couple of those. Or we can build more things within New York City. One of the things that we want to build in New York City is solar. So one of the things we're doing right now is we're trying to make sure that we get more rooftop solar installed across the city. We have a lot of rooftops in the city. Most of them don't have solar on them, and there's not a good reason for a lot of that. So this is our city had made the commitment to get 1,000 megawatts of solar onto rooftops by 2030. This is tracking our progress and how close we are to getting there. And you can track it year by year, and you can see how close we are to our actual goal. And you can see what we'll need to build every year in order to get there. Of course, we can build a lot faster. One of the things our office is doing right now to make this faster is we are currently, we actually already submitted our funding request from the federal government for IRS funding. Now, what we're going to do with that funding is we're going to do something called Public Solar New York. What that is, it's basically a public investment to get low or no cost solar onto the roofs of homeowners that live in low-income neighborhoods, basically giving access to solar in communities that traditionally have been more impacted by fossil fuels and climate change. Let's see. We'll move up next to emissions. This is tracking sources of emissions in our city. We have this chart here, which shows you year by year the total emissions of the city and has them broken down by buildings, transportation, and waste. And it has here our 2050 goal. So you can see how close we are getting to that or how not so close we're getting to there so far. And we do break that down in these this bar chart, but we break them down even further down here, where you can actually go into buildings, transportation, waste, and get the specifics on where those emissions are coming from. So you can see what's coming from residential, commercial, and manufacturing. You can see how they differ by what kind of power they're utilizing. For instance, you can see that residential buildings use more natural gas, while commercial and institutional buildings use more electricity. You can also look at different kinds of fuels that we use and how we are doing with reducing them from 2021 or increasing them in some cases. You can also see that for transportation, where you can see that broken down by different means of transportation. We also keep track of new bike lanes, bike parking spots added. Is anyone here a biker? I know I am. Cool. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar that you get to your location you're trying to get to. You get there faster because sometimes biking is, in fact, the fastest way to get there. But of course, once you get there, you find that there's no bike parking, and you can't find anywhere to tie up your bike. Our city currently is trying to figure out a way around that by installing more bike parking spaces, and we're tracking of how much we're building every year here. So you can hold us accountable to see how much we should be building. We're also tracking bike lanes. We separate them out by protected versus unprotected. We're tracking electric vehicles. This is all vehicles that are registered in New York City. You can see right now only 1% of New York City registered vehicles are electric vehicles. Trying to change that. Over here is our New York City fleet. This is cars that are actually owned by New York City. This is how many of them are electricity year over year. And then we have a map of infrastructure, things like bike lanes. So you can actually see a map of this across the entire city.
Do you have anything on how many charging stations you have for electric cars?
Yeah, right here. Oh, it doesn't seem to be working at the moment. That's weird. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, you can see charging stations here,
The red dot.
the red dots.
Those are not public though.
Those are not public. Those are for New York City EV fleet stations. As far as public stations goes, there's a map for that, I believe, on Con Edison's website.
And can you do other things with this map?
Like what?
Like, my brain isn't functioning very well. Emissions or,
We have different maps that track different things. You'll see a bunch of different maps that do that track different things over the course of me going over this website.
yeah, I mean, you were talking in the beginning about equity and just understanding geographically where we make progress.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do track as what's it called, a filter for all these maps is we have an overlay of environmental justice areas. You can actually see like how some of these things interact with areas of environmental justice need. For instance, you can see bike lanes and how they interact with communities that have more environmental need. And you're going to notice that a lot of times there's a clear lack of infrastructure in those neighborhoods. It's one way that we can directly show that the city's not doing things in places that they might be needed more.
Yeah.
Part of the reason of this tool is to make sure that people have that in a way that's easily digestible. We also track waste. We're looking at organics collection participation. We have diversion rate by borough. So you can see how every borough is doing with diverting things from landfills. And a really cool map we have here too, under buildings and emissions, is we have this map of all benchmark buildings in the city. So this map, you can actually look into your specific neighborhood. Let's zoom into this area. So you can actually like look at what buildings are benchmarked in the city that are required to be benchmarked under local law 85. These are all self-reported, so they're not guaranteed to be super accurate. We will be working on that under local law 97. But for now, this is the information we have. And you can actually look at each building, see what buildings are doing well, which ones aren't doing great. And you can actually click on them. Say like, hey, you want to figure out who's creating more emissions in your neighborhood. You can click on this building. You can see that this is in West 43rd Street. You can see exactly how much emissions that they're putting out, what kinds of emissions they're putting out, what their land use is. You can see this is a parking garage. And you can see why they're putting out a lot of emissions. In the case of a parking garage, you could assume that it's car exhaust. Yeah, so you can actually like hold specific buildings accountable in your neighborhood. We have climate finance. Now, this is an interesting section because this is the section that holds specifically our office accountable. We're trying to be more transparent with how we, has anyone heard of our net zero plans that we put out this year? I think I'm seeing a couple nods.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so we put out a plan this year for 3 of our pension systems to bring them to net zero by 2040. That means like making sure that our financed emissions are down to 0. So we're tracking that by the plans, and we're tracking that by specific fund. So you can actually look at what we've reduced so far. You can see the stuff so far. That's all based on divestment from fossil fuels, which was completed this past year. Then this represents the plan that we have. We only plan to 2030 because planning beyond 2030, when we know that we won't be in power, is impractical. So we made a plan to get to as far as we can get by about 2030. And you can see how much we'll have to go after that as well. And you can see that by specific funds as well. So you can toggle between them. We also look at the specific financed emissions by system, and we separate that by scopes. Does anyone know what the difference between scope 1 and 2 and scope 3 is? The biggest difference is scope 1 and 2 are things that are I'm going to simplify this as much as possible because it's kind of complex and I only have 20 minutes. But the basics are that 1 and 2 are within the direct control of a company. If you, for instance, know that you're buying a bunch of natural gas to burn it, that burnt natural gas is a scope 1 emission. Scope 3 is more difficult. That's stuff up beyond your supply chain and below your supply chain. So the stuff you're using, how much that impact that stuff has. For instance, if you don't put out any emissions, but you buy a lot of a product that puts out tons of emissions, your scope 3 emissions aren't going to be so high because you're depending on something that causes tons of emissions. So we separate this out so we can see how much scope 3 we're also contributing to. Because if we only cut down 1 and 2, we're going to be ignoring a very important part of where emissions come from investments. And we're also investing in climate solutions. One of the, we're trying to not just divest, we're trying to invest to be a part of the solution. So we've committed to getting $50 billion of climate solutions into our pension funds by 2035. So far, we have 8.4 billion. And I can't tell you the new number yet, but we're actually about to release some new numbers that got us quite a bit higher, which we're excited to announce. I think we're going to announce it next week. So stay tuned for that. Environmental equity. This is an interesting one. So this tracks environmental quality by air, water, and land. So you can see different kinds of pollutions and where they are in our city and the nature of them. For air quality, we track different kinds of pollutants, and we have made maps of them, so you can see what parts of our city are most polluted with specific kinds of emissions over the course of a year. We have them separated out by particulate matter. So remember, I'm not going to say does anyone remember. I'm assuming that everyone remembers the gigantic air quality issue we had this past summer. That was an issue with particulate matter. Now, particulate matter was particularly bad that day, those couple days. But it's not just those days that's readily visible that we have issues with particulate matter in the city. We actually have higher concentrations in some parts of the city at all times. And so people are actually chronically exposed to these things. So with this map, you can see where people are most chronically exposed to particulate matter. We also have that for nitrogen oxides.
Excuse me, Stephanie, can I?
Hey, that's us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh?
I noticed that in the particulate matter, our community board is one of the worst
Yeah.
areas in Manhattan.
Mhm.
Is that because of vehicular traffic going down to down 9th Avenue to Lincoln Tunnel?
I would it's hard to track specifically what it is from, but I would assume yes. I imagine that's from vehicular traffic.
And much is from buildings.
Well,
It's also-
emissions, but not particulate matter.
Well, we have
Well,
older buildings, which I
Mhm.
think are worse.
Older buildings that have, like for instance, that still burn fuel oil can put out particulate matter. Natural gas buildings usually don't. But a lot of our particulate matter does come from vehicles, not just their emissions, but also their brakes actually are a major cause of particulate matter. Whenever you break a car, which happens a lot when you're stuck in traffic, parts of your actual plates of your wheels will basically shear off a little bit, and that makes little clouds of particulate matter. So every time there's traffic, we're actually getting an extra dose of particulate matter in our city.
It's sort of what you-
Tires as a, right.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I said the rubber from the tires as a car or a bus rolls down the street, the tires are wearing down, and that I think is part of the particulate matter, right?
That's correct. Yes.
I think the sort of general understanding is that the worst areas in New York are around Cross Bronx Expressway. It's sort of that 95, it's further north, and it may be on other items, but if this is mostly from vehicular traffic, I'm surprised we're that much, we're this red.
Well, here's the thing. There's particulate matter from traffic. There's also industrial processes. Like some of these areas are industrial areas that are getting particulate matter from industrial sources.
It's interesting that the part of Manhattan that has the worst air quality is the part that'll be affected by congestion pricing.
I mean, that's why the people are often looking at congestion pricing as an issue in those areas, because those are areas that are most impacted. We also track nitrogen dioxides. We actually have a major nitrogen dioxide problem in New York City, as you can see by this very, very, very orange to red map. We also track ozone, which tends to impact more of our coastal regions. Ozone is also more commonly known as smog. And black carbon. So this is, from burning stuff. We also have, we track things with water quality. Let's see. So we have, this is basically every single water sampling site in the city. So you can see like what the most recent sample was in your neighborhood. So for instance, if we click, sorry, I'm clicking on the one closest to me. I should click one closer to you. For instance, if you look over here, you can see the last sample that they had there. You can see specifically if there was any issues with the water quality, as it looks like there was not in this one. There very rarely is, but it's also good to know when occasionally there is. So we created some transparency there.
If there's an issue, is it colored differently?
They're not colored differently. You can just like check your local one for the most recent one that we have in the
But
map.
how do you know if the number's good or bad?
Basically, if chloroform or E. coli are more than less than 1, it's a problem.
If they're more than one?
Yeah, I mean, like these are currently less than 1. That's good.
Okay.
You want those to be as low as possible. Basically, that's poop in your water. So, you want none of that.
Okay.
The other things that can be iffy, like turbidity, is like the clarity of water. So, if for instance, if water is coming out cloudy, that's high turbidity water. You might want to check to see if there's a higher number here if that happens. Things like that. Another really cool map we have here. Off.
Data over time?
What?
Do you have these data over time?
No, it's only the last one we have. Let's see. We had this really cool map. This one's going to take a while to load because it is in fact every single service line in the city. We're tracking lead service lines. I'm going to zoom in over here. It's going to take a second to load. So with this map, you can look at every single property in New York City, and you can see what kind of service line they have. If you're seeing a green service line, that means that service line is not lead. If you're seeing orange, it means that we don't know if that's lead. If you're seeing red, that means that that building has a lead service line that is known. So you want to make sure that if anywhere you're living or going that happens to have a red mark on it, you're making sure to run that water for a while and filter it. This is to create transparency to make sure people know that whatever home that they're living in may or may not have lead water lines.
Which block is that that's entirely red?
Which one, where? There's a few of those. Talking about this one?
Yeah.
11th Avenue.
Okay. 10th and 11th on.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty big parcel. I imagine it's one big building.
In the terminal building?
Could be. Well, actually, no, probably not because it's a private, it's not city owned.
Jarrett.
Well, I guess terminal building would be state owned, wouldn't it? Yeah, could be.
What's the cross street?
Right here. So.
Yeah. Do we get a number?
10th Avenue.
Oh, it's 39th.
39th.
Yeah.
And then what pier is red up there?
What?
Confused me slightly. One of
I'm
the
sorry.
buildings on the
Yeah, I
pier.
think she's asking about the pier. There's a pier. That's right. If you could zoom out again, if that's okay.
I have a very short amount of time to do this. I encourage you all to play with this on your
Okay.
own to see to play around with it because there is a lot of information here, and I strongly encourage you to explore it. Let's see. We got land. This will show you chemical bulk storage facilities and
He asked
brown.
the question, he can answer the question.
Okay,
You know what I mean? Come on,
well, we can ask after the
you know,
presentation.
ridiculous. But we're looking at the chart, we want to ask two things, we can't answer it, can't ask.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm saying if the board has something to ask, I think we should answer it. Thank you. I get your time frame, but if we have a specific question, you ask us to ask you during the presentation, to ask you, so that's what we did. So let's go back to the chart and let's see what's there in red that we asked about, please.
As the person who asked the question, I'm comfortable just looking it up myself. But appreciate it, Stephanie.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you look over here, you can see bulk storage facilities. Let's see, let me make sure to clear this out. Bulk storage facilities are basically areas of the city that are known to store chemicals. So you can actually see what chemical facilities are in your neighborhood. You can click on them. You can see specifically where that is, what kind of site type it is, and you can see what kinds of details they're having. You can actually click through to find more details on that. So you know what chemicals are being stored near you, so you can be informed about what is in your area. And we also have brownfield sites. Brownfield sites are basically areas that have traditionally been polluted that are currently under cleanup. You can see under this map ones that are currently cleaned up or ones that are in the process of getting cleaned up. You can click on them to find more information about where they are, what they are, and why they're being cleaned up. You can also go through to get more site-specific detail as well. And once again, we also have this overlapped with environmental justice area filter, so you can see how these interact with environmental justice areas. Last but not least, we have resiliency. This is actually one of my favorite slides because this is the one that tracks how sea level rise will impact our city. So let's start with coastal flood risk. It's just going to take a moment to load. Cool. All right, so one of the ways that global warming is going to impact our city is that as the sea levels rise, we're going to have less and less parts of our city that stay dry. So right now, what you're seeing on this screen is the current 100-year floodplain. Everywhere you're seeing has at least a 1% chance of flooding every year. But that's not going to stay consistent over the course of the next couple decades. So we're looking at future floodplains as well. So you can see what the floodplain will look like. This is now. This is what it'll look like in 2050s. You can then see 2080s. And you can see that in the year 2100. So you can see lots of parts of our city are going to be potentially in flood zones by then. We will also, outside of being a floodplain, you also might be worried about just regular high tide. Right now, high tides can already impact parts of our city. If you look at this, you can see that these are areas that get regularly flooded during high tides. This is currently. But that's going to change. It's going to get higher as we have higher and higher seas. This is predicted for 2050. And by 2080, this is what we'll see. And by 2100, we'll see lots of parts of our city that are regularly flooded, including entire swaths of certain neighborhoods in Queens and Staten Island, some parts of Manhattan, some parts of Brooklyn. So how do we prevent that from happening? Well, we have to build resiliency projects. So one thing we're doing here is we're tracking all of our city developed resiliency projects. So you can actually look at all these things. These are all those resiliency projects being put up around the city. You can click on them. You can find out more information about them. You can find out who's responsible for them. You can find out when they're supposed to be completed. This way you can make sure that if there's one near you that you want to see completed, you can specifically make sure that it's done on time, and you can hold the city accountable to that. We also have heat risk. So heat risk shows a couple different things. We have our heat vulnerability index. You can see what parts of the city by community board are most impacted by heat. We also track vegetative cover. So you can see what parts of our city have more vegetative cover. That's things like trees. and you can see how they interact with environmental justice areas. Now, one of the things I like to do is toggle between environmental justice areas and tree cover, because you're going to notice they're exact opposites. And you're going to see that also with heat vulnerability index, showing that heat is not just a problem equally across the city, it's specifically a problem in a lot of environmental justice communities. Let's have stormwater and flash flood risk. This is for, as climate changes, we will also see more things called microbursts. So those are extreme amounts of rainwater that happen in small amounts of time. That's what caused the flooding incidents we've had this past year and the year before that, especially in Southeast Queens. So we're tracking that. Let's see. We have rainfall scenarios. So you can see what parts of our city are more likely to have flooding over in different scenarios. So you can see both moderate stormwater flooding and extreme stormwater flooding. You can see that with extreme water flooding, there's actually a lot of our city that's vulnerable to extreme rain scenarios. So what are we doing about that? Sorry, do we have a question?
No, go ahead, keep going. Okay.
There's a couple of things we can do about that. One of the things we can do is we can build sewer systems. These are currently in development DP sewer capital projects. Those are things that are going to expand the use of our sewer system in our city. But of course, DP sewer capital projects are very, very big, very, very expensive, and they take a very, very long time. So we have to do things in between now and then as well. So one of the things that DP uses to prevent water from going into the system is utilizing green infrastructure. Those are things like bioswales that basically allow water to be seeped into the ground. So you can see with this, you can see like where there are bioswales or other kinds of green infrastructure. You can see what specifically they are. You can see that this one is like permeable pavers, so like basically concrete that allows you to absorb water. You can see where they are, when they're supposed to be completed, and things like that.
What are the different colors on this map?
Different colors represent different levels of completion.
Okay.
And you can also see where there are combined sewer overflow systems. So you can see where we are dumping stormwater and sewage into our oceans. I'm not sure if you all know, but we dump about 2 billion gallons of raw sewage into our waterways every year in New York City. We're working on reducing that, but it's a big project. These are the areas that those usually happen, and you can actually see what parts of our city will spill out to different parts of our CSO outfalls. And we have a couple of different resources here on community preparedness, so you can see how to create a disaster plan. We have an emergency planning toolkit for communities, some preparedness training for organizations, and also continuing operations plan example for businesses. So you can go here to see some quick resources about how to prepare for an emergency. And last but not least, we have the feedback form. This form is basically if you have any idea of how we can make this this project better, more accurate, more usable. Fill out this form. It actually goes to my inbox, so I'll see it myself. I maintain this project, so usually I'll be the one responding to it. And with that, I open the floor up to any questions.
Great, we'll take questions from the room first. I'm gonna try and, if you stop sharing your screen, I think. There we go. Roberta.
Thanks, Stephanie. This is great. I was just curious if you plan on updating it as you get new data. It seems like some of the data is from 21 and would love to see the data as time goes on. Curious about that.
We're working on two different things. Well, one, we have one yearly update that we do every year, which is just a complete overhaul of the system. We do that every year around Earth Day. And then we also are working on trying to automate some of this. So we're trying to figure out what of this data has the appropriate API to allow us to just allow it to update constantly without our use. It's actually a little difficult. A lot of the, for some reason, a lot of the continuously updated files on open data get restarted every year for no reason at all. So we're trying to get to the bottom of that and trying to figure that out.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm wondering about something I've heard of called rainwater harvesting that's done in parks, captures the rainwater. I heard an interview that on Brian Lehrer recently that said that Hoboken attributed their success in attacking flooding mostly to rainwater capture. Are we doing any of that anywhere in the city?
I know some places do rain barrels and stuff like that. I'm not sure of any major New York City plans to do it widespread, but I mean, certainly something we should be doing.
So I don't know anything about it. I just know the term rainwater harvesting. I know it's done in parks. I don't
A lot of
know
times
if it's-
people will do things like rain barrels, so that they'll capture runoff from areas to reuse it for things like gardens.
This is a little bit bigger than that. I mean, they usually get all over the city of Hoboken, New Jersey. It must be a little bigger than that. I thought you might know something about it. Another time.
Sure.
Anyone else in the room before we, go ahead, Tina.
Just wondering where the data come from, like, how do we know, that the data is accurate?
The vast majority of the data comes from New York City Open Data, which is a portal that our city puts out where different parts of our city will report data at different parts of the year on what they're doing. Some of it comes from other sources as well, but they're all from public sources and they're all sourced. So you can actually click through to find out where we got the information as well. So you can see the raw data.
Okay, great.
Does that answer your
Yeah, the
question?
raw data, if that's available, yeah.
Raul?
Stephanie, fantastic presentation. I take it that this is a project from Commissioner Lander. I don't think this existed before he was elected. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is brand new as of last year.
Great, great. Well, it makes me happy that I voted for him. So I do have some observations though. Data, it's for what you're giving this presentation to just this community board? Are you giving it to all the community boards? Are you taking back feedback that you might get from us? Take it back to the commissioner or to other decision maker? What's the reasoning for this presentation, which I'm very happy about, but what are you gonna do with this information that you gathered today?
So we do these trainings all over the city. I've done this with hundreds of people, hundreds of different organizations across the city in every single borough. The point of these is to make sure people are aware of it, what's in there, and arm people with what they need to utilize this data. I also do a more detailed training if you'd like. Anyone who has a community groups that they'd like a more detailed training with, I will train anyone you put in front of me.
Do you guys provide, I mean, capturing data is great, but there's also the part about the data analysis and then taking it back to decision makers. Do you do that? If you observe something in the data that merits the attention of decision makers?
Yes.
You do that. So for example, you flash through it real quickly in the emissions tab, I noticed, if I saw it correctly, that the use of natural gas by residential buildings is actually going up rather than going down. I think you had a benchmark back in 2005 versus 2021, something like that.
Yes, a lot of buildings have converted away from oil to gas.
Right, but gas is equally or more toxic than oil.
Yep.
So we seem to be going in the wrong direction with
No
that.
disagreement here.
Is that, and that's a very small, I mean, very quick observation I had. Does that go back to the decision makers to try and do something about that?
I mean, we are one of the decision makers, so we are aware of that. But one of the things that our city's done recently is we've passed a bill to make sure that we electrify our building stock. And part of what Local Law 97 will do also is try to convince more people to go electric as well. Yeah, so I guess fundamentally what this does is it allows people like you to see that data. This way you can hold us accountable. A lot of us that work in government, we already know this. And a lot of people who work for I mean, dare I say, politicians who aren't doing enough about this might also know it as well, but it's up to you to make it obvious to them. And we're trying to make sure we give you tools to make that obvious.
If I could follow up on just that, and Marty, I know you have your hand up, is, well, with the gas. So this is not even 10 years ago. There was a big city push from oil to gas for all buildings. So the city was actually pushing, and I say that as a member of our building board, they would say, get off dirty oil, get off dirty oil, get off dirty oil, push to gas, push to gas, push to gas. And it was a very, I mean, it was a costly conversion. Con Ed sometimes did it for free, you know, because there was incentives. So the reason why you might have seen that going up from I mean, we're talking not even 8 years ago, right, Steph? I mean, it was maybe even 6 years ago. It was very recent.
Yeah, up to like 5 years ago, actually.
Yeah, yeah. So if you see it go up, it's because everyone was pushing the buildings to go to gas. And then literally a few years later, they're like, sorry, gas is not, you know, get back to that. You know, like, wait a minute, we just made like millions of dollars to switch over all our pipes and everything. So, you know, I think, I guess it's changing so quickly, right? That,
It also coincided with the fracking issue from New Jersey here. So that was a squash.
And we currently actually also incentivize people to go to gas. Actually, there's currently a bill in Albany called the New York State Heat Act, which will actually do away with that subsidy, which I encourage you all to write your legislators about. We've actually come out in support of that bill.
So that might actually be a sign of success, right?
right, yeah, I guess. Marty, I saw you had your hand up on, go ahead. Oh, it's down. Do you?
It's interesting we're talking about technology because my technology so failed today. I really apologize for not having come in on time. It happens, I know, but there it is. The question was asked before by Lisa, what the dots mean, and you answered it, but you didn't show us. Are those dots? Is there a key on the bottom of the slide that you didn't scroll down to?
Yeah, there's a key to all these maps.
I know you have, I do have one or two questions. You mentioned, well, first, let me go where the lead water lines were, where that was red. So if you see, if it's your building or an office building you work at or something and it's red, what can we do? Like, what is the steps to?
First thing you should do is talk to your landlord. I know I did this training in a building in Queens as a school building. And I'm like, oh, yeah, let's look at our building that we're in right now. And we found out that no one there knew that the building that they were in actually had lead service lines. So what they did is they called their landlord. First thing you can do is contact them to figure it, and they may or may not have access to funding sources to get them off that. One of the things that our federal government is doing right now is they're making a big push to get rid of lead service lines across the country. So hopefully we'll see a bigger investment in that as well. There's some investments that our state has made as well, but it's, I would say, insufficient.
Yeah. Another thing, when you were talking about EVs, you said there's only 1%. You saw the pie of EVs in New York. It was a very, very small sliver. And then you said, we're trying to change that. How are we trying to change that? Because it's very difficult to see any movement in any incentive to get to EVs at all.
One of the big things that are happening right now is there's been incentives to build more chargers around the city to make it easier to have an electric car around the city. There's also some buildings that are currently, creating more parking spaces for electric cars to allow them to have a place to stay. That also has overnight charging options, things like that.
And
there's also some incentives out there as well.
Yeah, those are, I think a lot of them have run out and then they're far and few between. I think they were like, like for private, like if you buy from a certain company, they'll get, and then they use them all up already. But anyway, that's neither here nor there right now. But one other thing, and I think this is just a suggestion when, because our committee has talked about this, when you show the map of EV chargers, it's slightly, I guess, those are all private chargers. Like those are, you have to pay $40 to get into a lot, or it's a private, it's not like public can go in and charge. And I think when someone looks and like, oh, look at all these chargers, they're not accessible to just regular public to go and charge. So I don't know if that, like Maury said, if there's a key, I don't know if that's mentioned on the key, but it shouldn't even, I don't even think they should be there. It's, you know, it's not really a, you know what I mean? It's like a wall charger that some parking lot guy put up. But anyway, just something to be aware of.
In other words, it'd be nice to separate out what are publicly available.
Correct.
And the ones that are behind paywall.
Right, I mean, if he put up what is publicly available, I think that literally there's three dots in all of Manhattan and like 2 on the east side and 1 in like north, like it would be nothing,
That would really improve the data.
yeah, so. Marty, go ahead, and then I see David has a hand up, and I think there's someone, I think someone from the public has a hand up too, Stephanie, if you can just bear with us.
I have 2 more questions and thank you. I asked before whether you have data that's over time and you said it was new. Are you building in over time data into future presentations?
Well, like I said earlier, we're working on figuring out ways that we can automate some of this information.
It seems to me that pollution and data over time and all of the data that you're presenting would inform us as time goes by, having some way to see that over time. So I hope that's going to be built in. You talked also before about the stormwater. This is not really maybe a question for the controller's office, but I'm curious: is the stormwater, is the sewage that's being built? And you showed a map of various places where it is. Are they separating stormwater from sewage, or are they just building the same combined sewer stormwater system in those places?
It depends on where in the city. Most of the city is still combined.
And there's no separation going on as far as you know?
For most of the city, no.
That's too bad. But thank you.
Welcome.
David?
Thanks for the presentation, Stephanie. The floodplain map that you showed, it projects forward to the year 2100. That's based on the current rate of climate change. Is that correct?
That's based on certain kinds of scenarios that we actually do have in the key you can look at.
Do they take into account the likelihood that in the next 76 years, there's going to be, more effort to control climate change?
We do not take necessarily what you might call an optimistic stance on it.
Okay, thank you.
We want to be prepared for the worst, not what we hope for. There's an old Boy Scout saying that says, hope for the best, plan for the worst. And that's what we intend to do.
I think that's it for the board. Michael, I'm sorry, Brad. Brad is on the board has a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, how much does the Parks Department hear from you guys regarding some of these issues and policies? If you look at our district where it showed, water runoff to bring down the heat and climate, there was not one spot. We asked for permeable asphalt and all that type of stuff, and we're always constantly told, no, we can't do it. Yet you see it in the rest of the city. So I'm just curious on how that relationship works, because we were told all the time by the parks that they can't do it, or DOT can't do it in our area, right? So
a lot of times when it comes to permeable pavement, there's areas that it works and there's areas that it doesn't. It has a lot to do with what's under that pavement. For instance, an area that has a very high rock bed is not going to be a very good candidate for permeable pavement because there's not going to be anywhere for the water to go. That's often a problem in Manhattan.
And Stephanie, that's why I'm bringing it up, because I'm very curious on like our parks. This is probably something that could be conquered. We have swells, we could raise a little elevation, we could work that out. I'm just curious on, because we are a desert, we're the most polluted and we're the least, our chart doesn't look good for us over here at all.
Yeah, there's different resiliency projects that are being built around the city specifically to deal with some of these issues. It's different sewer projects. When it comes to areas that are very rocky and there's nowhere for water to go, usually the best options are to find ways to divert that water, prevent that water, reuse that water, or building a sewer system. Sometimes the answer, unfortunately, isn't easy.
For instance, Stephanie, I saw something just this weekend on 60 Minutes about Wyoming on there, because they're like, we are not going to be able to convert in time. We are so heavily involved in fossil fuels. But a way to capture that negative pollution on it. And that governor is allowing all these prototypes to come in and try to solve that problem, and some have been successful. I'm just curious, in this whole chart, is there anything related to that? Yes, we all would love to get natural power, but in the reality of our needs, I don't think we're getting there in 25 years. So what is being done through your statistics there regarding that type of technology on our power plants from where we get our fuel?
Can you repeat that question? I'm not sure what you're specifically saying.
So currently, it was just in the news this past weekend. Can you hear me?
Stephanie, can you hear him?
I can hear.
Oh,
They are, because we're not gonna be able to change over to all this power naturally, that we're still heavily reliable on fossil fuels, gas, coal, oil. So that state in particular is allowing a lot of new technology to try to capture that poor emissions, to make it a cleaner energy. And I'm wondering what is being looked at in our city for that. We brought it up a few times. I don't know if you hear me.
I mean, I think the controller is just.
I just wanna know if there's a stat, because they have all these programs.
Do you
This
have
is
a
what we're
stat?
doing.
I think it's more of a stat. We know you're just compiling information and they're kind of putting it out there, but I think Brad is asking if there was a stat for that.
You're asking if there's a stat about carbon capture? Is that specifically what you're asking about?
No. Keep going. We'll send it in an email.
Sure.
I have a follow-up question too.
Sure.
Brad's question brought to mind one of the charts you showed, Stephanie, on climate finance. You were showing with pride, it sounded like that the three retirement systems of New York were divesting their investments in oil and gas and fossil fuels. And with a goal of net zero by, I think, 2050 or something like that.
2040.
Right, something like, yeah. But there's another school of thought to that rather than divesting your stock holdings in oil companies, you want to actually increase your holdings so that you have more voting power, and you can put more directors on the board of directors to change the direction of the company. Has the city considered that as a possibility?
So you're talking about.
On the companies by controlling more of the stock and therefore more of the voting directors on the board of directors.
Yeah, I'm familiar with what we're talking about. You're talking about what's called engagement. That is one thing that we do with our holdings. There's specifically holdings that we believe can benefit from engagement with, which we do hold on to and do not divest from. And we have ongoing dialogue from, and we regularly introduce shareholder resolutions at their board meetings to help improve their practices. One example of this is we did this with Starbucks recently to increase their labor friendliness. It's because we hold a lot of Starbucks stock. They were able to introduce resolutions and vote on those resolutions to allow them to pass, to make sure that people are being treated well in their workforce. When we're talking about divestment, we're talking about divesting from things like companies that their entire purpose is to mine for fossil fuels. You can engage all you want with a company that all they do is drill for oil, but they drill for oil. It's what they do. So there's not much you can do with engagement there. So we divest from places like that.
Well taken. Thank you.
Great. I think we have one question from the public. Michael, I think you're over, so go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Leslie. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for the presentation. I really appreciate all the wonderful information and look forward to interacting with the website and submitting some recommendations. My question is, I know that just briefly based on some of my work in my undergrad and then rereading your reports and the data that you pulled from open data. So our community district has some of the highest PM 2.5 in all of Manhattan, and also the lowest street tree density or urban forest. What are maybe the top 2 recommendations that you have for us as people that live in the community board for that may be the most cost effective and efficient in combating the climate? Is it bioswales, more street trees, less parking? What would you recommend?
There's a couple different things that are being proposed right now. One thing I would encourage you to look at is what's it called? We Act for Environmental Justice, who represents some of the neighborhoods to your north. They have put out basically a heat ready platform this past summer. They have a bunch of proposals in there that I think are actually really good, specifically dealing with things like urban ecology and things like that to bring our heat islands into a more bearable amount of variability. So I guess a good place to start would be looking at We Act report on that, because they're pretty thorough in there, and you can get a lot of great ideas about what's already going on and what legislation is already being proposed.
Thank you, Michael. Stephanie, thank you very much. Again, we know that you came last month, and we apologize that you had to do the repeat, but we appreciate you coming back this month. All these stats and all that, it's a committee that we're very interested in this stuff, and I'm sure a bunch of us will go online and take a look at their blog. And
I appreciate that. And if anyone has any groups or community groups or anything like that want to benefit from more thorough training, please let me know. Usually I do like hour and a half long trainings in these. So let me know and we'll make it happen.
Okay, and also if some members have follow-up questions, we can just email you, or is that okay?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Great, now a good segue to EDC. And you know what I'm gonna say, right? One of the biggest polluters in our in our district. Not you guys, but
That's only short,
it's a big bubble.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, take it away. I think, is our Ports of America here?
Yeah, actually, I see that Steve is on as an attendee. If someone can move him over as a panelist, since he'll be running through a presentation.
Janine, can you hear that?
Yep, I'm moving him over.
Okay,
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll give a little introduction. And I have to say, that presentation was very informative, and I'm drinking tap water. So I was eager to look up on the climate dashboard, and happy to see that my building is not a lead service line. So that's a great resource. But for anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Diana Sweetai. I work in EDC's Government and Community Relations Division. I cover Manhattan south of 96th Street. So I work closely with Tara Das, who is also from the same division, and she covers transportation specifically. So our portfolios kind of overlap. And we work very closely with my colleague Sadir, who's here from our Asset Management Division. And we're also joined by Steve and Ken from Ports America, the cruise terminal operator. So we're here tonight as part of an ongoing conversation with CB4 about this waterfront and the ports. This committee, I know, received a presentation in October. We appreciate the letter that you sent following your November full board meeting. We had a recent site visit, and there have been ongoing conversations with this committee and the board leadership about this whole area. So I just want to say we're very appreciative of the ongoing partnership with CB4. We've been working hard to be responsive to the board, to be transparent and communicative as we work on a number of different issues, and be responsive on any questions or concerns that come up. So before we launch into the topic for today, I just want to give a couple of updates on some housekeeping items. First, the open space by Pier 88 under that viaduct. We looked into it. It's a space that we looked when we were on site together. So we looked into it, and it does require, it's in poor condition, so it needs repair before it can be reopened to the public. So we're conducting an engineering analysis to look at what repair needs to be completed. That process will take about 6 months, after which we'll be able to identify the next steps for reopening that space to the public. So we'll keep you updated as we move along there, and we're happy to come back and report back after that analysis is completed. And then on truck idling, We know this is a big issue. EDC is working with Ports America to talk to cruise lines, to communicate to their vendors, to discuss the need to shut off their engines where applicable. I know that we're in the process of determining whether any of the vendors require idling for their services, but have been very communicative to the cruise lines and the vendors, the need for shutting off their engines. We've been on site, we're keeping a close eye on it, but would reiterate for somebody who observes it happening to report that to 311 to let us know. I'll share a link. There's a direct on 311. There's a vehicle idling section, so you'll want to submit it directly to there, and appreciate you flagging that for us when you notice it. So EDC and Ports America are here today to present on the plans for the Pier 90 apron extension. As many of you remember from the tour, we conducted Pier 90 is in need of modernization to allow for more contemporary ship builds to dock and to plan for future shore power connections. And a note on shore power, the shore power study is in the very final stages. We just have a couple of things to wrap up with Con Edison and get their what's called a load report from them, and to review some potential funding opportunities for next steps. So once those are finalized, we'd be happy to come back and present on the findings of the study and what the next steps are. So as the cruise terminal operator, Ports America is working on the design and build out of the Pier 90 apron work. So we're here today to walk you through what the design concept looks like and what the next steps on the process are. So now that we have Steve, hi Steve, I can see you now.
How are you?
I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to run us through a presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Diana. And would you be able to put the slides up, because I'm not sure that I don't see any capability for me to do it. Maybe I'm
Sure, let me
technically challenged here. Sorry.
Sure, give me one moment. I didn't realize how many windows I had open through the through the day. Can you see my screen?
I do. Okay. So as a follow-up to our tour back in October, we wanted to provide you, as Diana said, an update and kind of walk you through where we are and our design and what our objectives are. So our just a little bit of a timeline here. So we engaged B&A, Bermillo and Agimil. They're probably the leading architect and marine engineer for cruise terminals throughout the world. They have offices in New York and Miami and all over. They are who we selected to design our apron and our marine engineering services. We were able to submit our joint permit application for in-water work to the regulatory authorities in June of this year, earlier this year, which is still, it's under their review and comments and questions that are ongoing at this point. We recently achieved about a 90% completion of our construction documents a couple of months back, or actually more recently than that. Agreements for our next steps here for construction management and the passenger boarding bridges, which are really important, ADA compliant boarding bridges, and other procurement needs will happen in the early part of next year. With our project to build out a 60,000 square foot apron that will be butted up against the existing Pier 90 pier structure to allow for this new service apron to essentially allow trucks to be serviced on the outside and eventually allow it to be able to split our arrivals and departures, similarly to how Pier 88 works or how the airport works. So EDC has undertaken a pile rehabilitation project that will occur at some point next year. Could be some overlap here between our construction and their rehab work. Still fine tuning that at this point, but this is kind of a best estimate at this point. So you can go ahead to the next slide, please. Thank you. As I said, the objectives are to modernize these facilities to be able to serve and provide a much better passenger experience, guest experience with the larger ships that the industry is wanting to bring to New York and helping to promote the and continue to grow and rebound the cruise industry and the travel industry in New York, and obviously breathing some new life into the pier, which is really in need of update. Again, modernizing the passenger access with ADA compliant boarding bridges, and some of these newer vessels have these overhanging lifeboats, which the gangways will come equipped with these offset legs that will avoid conflict. Many ports are running into that problem with modern ships with boats that overhang their hulls and causing conflict. So, and then most importantly, allowing for the future installation for shore power connectivity, which does not exist today. It does in Brooklyn, but not in Manhattan. So at Pier 90, we've built in shore power readiness, which is essentially the design will provide for trenching and vaults for the eventual installation of shore power, pending recommendations that come from the feasibility study that EDC is at this point awaiting. Okay, next slide. So this is just kind of a very high level schematic showing what the new apron will look like. It comes 60, as I said, a concrete apron built on steel piles driven into the bedrock. 2 boarding bridges. It'll have modern foam fenders to breast the ship off, and 150-ton bollards to handle the biggest ships afloat. And then we've also considered some lessons learned in this design from the previous design over at Pier 88. And one of the key elements too that we've brought into play here is this northwest corner fendering system that the tides and currents can be very strong in the winds. And so getting these ships into the basins can be challenging at times. And as the ships get bigger, it doesn't get easier. And so this system on the corner there that we're designing is going to allow for ships as needed to be able to pivot and slide off of that corner, whereas the one at 88 really wasn't designed that way. So, next slide, please. So again, next slide, we can go into a little more on the shore power. So again, as I said, it's a concrete vault and a chase system that will be built in the apron readiness, movable access covers, etc. Again, we wanted to be mindful that this is an important need for our industry. I think the industry has got a big focus on being net zero by 2050. That's a goal. I think organizations like CLIA, which is the biggest cruise line trade association. I was just at a conference down there in Coral Gables. That was the #1 topic. They continue their focus and multiple committees addressing all opportunities and globally at all ports, destinations the cruise lines call in to find more opportunities to reduce carbon emissions. Next slide. So this just talks through that, there's been some technical studies that are now, again, being conducted by EDC, and have to understand the necessary I guess, grid requirements and what Con Ed is able to provide as part of that discussion. And then Ports America's going further in our detail of not just the not just simply the areas of the trenching and the vaults, but where the transformer equipment will sit, and these little substations, which you'll see in the next slide. So that this shows that I think I wasn't able to make a meeting we had recently, but we're looking at where these containers, essentially 20-foot containers, that would be placed on Pier 90. We're looking at where the best possible locations for those would be, potentially, you know, on the apron level, maybe on the roof level. It's all kind of to be determined. It may be elevated from the dock itself to allow for movement, that sort of thing. And that's a little bit about it, what it looks like, and how we're planning for it when it comes to fruition.
What's the photo to the right?
You know, I don't know what that is.
It's cool looking.
I don't know.
I think it's an aesthetic example.
Yeah. All right. Next slide. And you can go to the next slide. So under a separate scope right now, there's really, the way I see it, 3 projects going on, right? The service apron, the pile rehab of the pier with EDC, and then the ultimate stakeholders here with the cruise line. A interior improvement study is now in progress, and it's expected to get to schematic design pretty soon, and then we can get some basic estimates and understanding with the cruise lines on what the priorities are. But it will allow for splitting the 2 levels. Pier 90 today, everything happens from that level. The disembark and the embark all happen, and it's very inefficient as ships get bigger. First of all, we can't even get past being able to dock a ship because the wharf infrastructure is so inadequate, so we can't even bring big ships over there. But the big ships that we can bring over there, the interior is less than desirable. And then the other objective here is to upgrade health and amenities to improve passenger satisfaction, and then also energy improvements and sustainable strategies as a very key element of the interior improvements. So I think the next slide is really just kind of showing some very basic space bubbles as we see it. Our operating team, Ken Winkler, who's our general manager, on the call. Hopefully he can add a little more color around some of this, or even some questions you may have, because he's our day-to-day boots on the ground person and key guy for us to make it all work. So again, this is just, again, a very broad layout of how we see the direction to give B&A for the schematic design that's in progress now. And I think that's it. Let's see if I'm right. I think that's the last slide, right, Diana?
That's right, Steve.
Okay, yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
No, absolutely, thank you. I'm sure we'll have questions in the room or maybe online. Do this or nope. Can you stop sharing? I think, Diana? Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Okay, well, step by step, right?
Rome was not built in a day. This is a very interesting and challenging project.
Okay, I'll go to Matt, go ahead. And then Brad after Matt.
Just curious about, I saw the timeline in the beginning, so you're anticipating construction to begin sometime in 2024, 2025, and then How long will that take?
approximately a year.
Okay.
But we are there's a lot of unknowns in this timeline in terms of, so many moving pieces, permitting, approvals, the cruise lines, input on the design of the interior. I think EDC has permitting that is going to be necessary for their work. So there's a whole lot of moving pieces and a lot of unknowns at this point. But again, we wanted to share an update of where we are at this point, and that, good things are in the works.
Got it. Will the cruise ships be unable to use Pier 90 during that year period?
Yes, we've actually assumed that next year and likely 25, Pier 90 will not be available for any cruise activity. And, Ken and Sudhir have worked with the cruise lines to tweak the schedules in such a way that they would either move some dates or share the pier at 88 or use Brooklyn as necessary. Those are challenging asks, and not everybody is entirely happy, but again, it's for the greater good down the road when we can get 90 done and bring it up to world-class status like it should be.
Got it. Yeah, so I was getting to sort of, because I know part of this in the press release was that community fund in terms of passengers that were coming and using the terminal. So I was just wondering how that would affect a possible contribution to that community fund if it was going to be offline for some portion of time. And I'm sure I would love to hear more about that piece of the puzzle. And I think it's something that we're all interested in learning more about, but those are my questions for now.
I don't know if EDC has any comment related to the community fund and when that would start, that sort of thing.
Yes, I think that the specific question was how will the closure or the changes in that operation affect the community fund? Sudhir, are you able to speak to that?
For the 2025, we do not see that much of an impact, but sorry, 2024, but 2025 maybe, but we're still doing an analysis because the cruise lines are not able to give us 100% vessel berthing allocations just yet. We're trying to obtain that. As soon as we have that, we can come back and give you of how 2025 is going to look and how much of vessels we will probably fewer vessels that might dock in Manhattan due to the construction work and what that looks like.
Great, thank you.
I know Brad, but Brad, do you mind if I just ask about, okay, thank you. I just want to follow because I did have a question, not only on the construction, but on the community fund and the passenger fee, since you guys are talking about it now. When does that and how can the community board know when that bank account opens up? Do you know what I mean? Like when is the trigger?
So the long-term agreements with the three major cruise lines is in effect for 2023, and the first quarter, end of the first quarter is when those funds will be calculated based on, the traffic and what have you. So towards the end of Q1 2024, we should have the numbers all ready, and we're still currently working with my partners, Tara, and our legal team, and obviously elected officials of your community to come up with a ease of doing business with the governance piece of it as well, just to make it as easy as possible to administer these funds and how the community chooses to go ahead with it.
Speaking on that, and for the sake of transparency, is there a way that this committee can be in close touch with that? Like, so we know, okay, 500,000, whatever is in the bank, and this is what it's being used for, right? So we can actually have a breakdown or an audit in real time. Is that a possibility? Can we talk about that either, maybe offline or something, just so we have some accounting of these funds?
Yeah, accountability and reporting is the two key elements that we need to have locked in with the governance structure. And my counterparts at Tara and Dana here will be working with elected officials, I think Butcher, and see what works, what is the best option, and how that's going to work for you guys. But there's going to be clear transparency in how those funds move around and get used and used down.
Great, thank you guys, and Brad, go ahead, Brad.
Hey, guys, love to talk about the fund. So in the item number 2, health and amenity improvement for passengers. I brought this up many times, and if you go back to your first screen on the mezzanine, it just shows a little symbol of them walking out to the taxi. And that is where the disaster is.
Yes.
That is the ultimate problem. We brought it up many times. It's a disaster. It's dangerous. I don't know how you could say and sit here as Pier of America and say, this is safe and this is a great experience. It's a terrible problem. It's a danger zone. And now we're getting bigger ships, could be even a bigger problem. And it's like dropping an airplane off, everybody walk off the stairs and get in a sidewalk. I don't even know what we're thinking here. We've talked about it many, many times. And by the way, I don't want our fund that we want to use for the parks to go to solve this problem. This should be part of this solution and looked at the whole thing.
Brad brings up a good point. Remember when we talked about that part of this unveiling, right, about this new agreement? There was a section that said a reimagining, a redesign, I don't know the exact wording, of transportation. And transportation to get there, transportation to get out, the trucks, and then remember, you and I were talking about this, saying, what is that gonna look like, or how deep is that going? Can you answer Brad's question maybe a little bit with that?
There is a piece in where that we will be obtaining data from the cruise lines as to understand and help us mitigate those flow of traffic. And then we're going to be looking to employ, we already have a company that is looking at traffic mitigation plans for us in Brooklyn, and we will get them engaged as soon as we start obtaining those data to see what this data is telling us and what is needed to better manage this traffic in and around the terminal. And we can always come back to you with as and when those plans are in motion. But Ports America already has some traffic management that we do in and around the terminal.
Yeah, but all the passengers walk straight out to the West Side Island. Okay. So we're doing a pier renovation. I don't see anywhere on there for staging of passengers, pickup of buses, some type of thing to keep it within the terminal. Not just dumping 1,000 people onto the sidewalk all at the same time. And again, we keep bringing it up over and over and over. I don't know what else to say. Great, the pier's being done. We love the cruise ships. Shore power is good. But we also want these people to experience and be safe. And also that affects our community. It's a nightmare over there. So I really think the pier needs to be looked at with them in mind, which is the number 2 item on the list, to pull some space back and make room for it. I just, there's no staggered times of people leaving. There's no buses there. There's nothing. You see all these old people with their luggage on the middle of the West Side Highway, trying to get across to the other side. There's nobody out there that you can even, what about just some labor? So I just think it's a big point.
I think Lowell has Lowell's pet project.
My pet peeve with EDC lately may be a solution to Brad's problem.
Go ahead, Lowell, tell them.
What if we used Pier 92 as a staging area for the cruise ships And EDC paid to fix 92, which I've been begging them to do for years now.
And you can just see it on their photo, they're just sitting there empty, it's
Yeah.
disaster.
Brad raises a problem, there's a huge problem there. You've got an empty pier right next to it.
So Pier
that we
90,
want rehabilitated.
With the
Yeah,
new,
that-
so they can walk through the new,
that's a
studio.
that's a very good suggestion. Pier 92, as of now, we have the load test that is being performed. We, as of I think a couple of weeks ago, we had equipment that's arrived. They're doing tug test, load test on that. Once we understand, because it was like deemed unstable and was condemned by Department of Buildings, but we're conducting load test to see what that is, what the reports are going to come back and what is needed to bring that pier online and how we're going to be using that. So definitely that is in our scope of everything else that is being planned for.
But if it's set up to use as a transportation hub, it solves the problem that Brad just explained to you.
And we get the rents.
Or partially.
We in the past we have used as staging areas and very efficiently, but as it's gone offline, we have to wait for all the due diligence and all the tests to be completed and make sure everything is safe and sound. And then we will start the planning process how we can use that. But we're trying to see it, like use it for multi services. It could be like a community space as well. It could be used as for cruise ships and anything that basically like a multi-purpose area, not just restricted just for cruise ships.
I'm fine with that, as long as something happens to 92 and it just doesn't rot into the river, which is the direction it's been going for the last 15 years.
Well, we could sign a lease for 20 years and say we're gonna do something. And not do it.
Well, then we can
Okay,
change our
okay,
name to Port
okay.
Air.
Guys,
Well, I guess,
And let's,
Okay.
then you get off the hook too, you can say, oh, I'll fix it.
So
my
I remember this when we were on our tour, that you had to do you're doing the load test.
Load
for
testing.
92. And then we talked about this also, that would also kind of give an understanding for what the RFP, right? Like what would be needed then for what projects? And I know Tina has a question, but when is that load test expected to be
So
completed?
there is a series of testing that's going to be performed there. So the initial result is expected somewhere end of Jan. And based on that, we will know if any more testing is needed or what the next step would be, because there's going to be a series of testing. But the first reports will guide us as to where we need to go with that. But as of like a couple of weeks ago, the company that is performing the tests are on site and doing those tests. I was getting ready to set up for those tests to be performed.
Great, thank you, and Tina, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question was in terms of timeline. So we have this project with the apron, and we have this problem, it's longstanding, that's just gonna get worse as the precincts get bigger in terms of,
Disembarking.
Yeah, so in terms of that pier that we need to rehabilitate and this project, where are the timelines? I mean, kind of apron project move ahead and, with the current plan, and then we have this pier that's gonna take a long time to rehabilitate. How is that gonna work?
Well, the pier has nothing to do with this project.
Right, but isn't there an overlap in terms of what you're talking about?
Well, I think what you're trying to say is, Tina, we're approving a new pier reconstruction. It's not accounting for the other problems. And Lowell's idea, maybe that helps a long-term solution. So if they came to us and said, here's a holistic plan, it might come in stages,
Right.
but we have a plan to do this. I will say, since Sadir's been coming to us,
Exactly.
he's had nothing but answers and great feedback and got us money. I mean, it's been a pleasure. So I trust him. when he's-
We're fans of you.
Yeah, I trust him when he says he's doing the test, we'll get it.
Yeah.
My only concern is how do we improve a pier without a traffic plan? It has to, we can't, I don't care, it's in Brooklyn, we need to have it now. We can't design a pier without that knowledge.
Well, we're not it's not design a pier, they're just renovating.
They're preventing the pier, but.
And it's the apron is just servicing a ship, right? It's not like renovating the outside of it, it's not
If you
renovating.
look at the drawing, it's 3 levels and it shows where people disembark on the top.
Right.
It
And
is
with
being
that,
renovated.
he's also put shore power on top as well, so that's. a
The
big
what?
renovation. He's also saying the shore power would be on top, maybe the second floor or something, the 8 containers, so there's something, it's gonna be a big renovation.
Yeah, right, but
So currently we are what is known as the low season. There is not that many ships coming in. We are going to be closely monitoring the passenger walking off the Pier 88 into the streets, and hoping we can put more controls and regulate how many people are crossing. Remember, there's also a bike path that runs right across, so there's always someone that is controlling as people cross, making sure nobody gets hit. We will definitely put it under a microscope and see if there's any more measures or staffing that we can add there to control and ease that crossing, making sure we kind of stagger those people coming out and we're not sending way too many people. There were some other issues that also got up with some taxi drivers walking into the road and disrupting those flow that we are addressing with the law enforcement as well. But I will be on site a lot more personally to see what sticks out and what small changes that can be done in the near future to address those issues. And also with regards to going back to the idling issues, I wanted to make a slight correction. It is me that is speaking to the cruise lines directly, who have engaged with me over phone and as well as by emails. They were very responsive. They're sending strong messages to their vendors that make those deliveries, that they need to comply with the law that requires them to not idle and pollute our cities. And obviously, if they continue to do that, they can expect to receive tickets, and we'll go from there. But we are watching it very closely.
Roberta?
I was curious if during the construction process, if there will be any adverse impacts or impacts to either the park or the cycling lanes. I don't know if you intend on having vehicles ultimately cross, from the Manhattan mainland, so to speak, over to the pier, and if that would create any sort of conflicts, but would be curious to understand that.
Most of the construction will be inside the terminal. That should be minimum to no disruption to the bike lane. The only disruption I can think of is a truck trying to get into the terminal, but I'm sure we will be carefully reviewing the timing of those trucks arriving into the pier. Once they're inside the terminal. They should not have any impact on outside pedestrians or cyclists or any of the Hudson assets outside our terminal.
I think quite a bit of the work will be happening on the water side by barge and so forth. So, at least with regard to the apron.
And I would just emphasize that to the extent that there are ever trucks, crossing that bike lane, that if there are any additional safety precautions, whether it be in a crossing guard or some sort of attendant there or lights, whatever it is, that might be helpful to prevent any potential conflicts with pedestrians or cyclists in that particularly narrow area.
Yes, the traffic people as part of the construction team for the movement of trucks. Yeah.
Anyone else in the room?
Marty's gonna say.
Yeah. Marty, go ahead. Marty, you're muted.
Of course I'm muted. It's the story of my life. I wholly want to second the statement Brad made about developing a holistic plan. It's nice to have a new apron, but I think we need to really argue for that. You said a few moments ago that you already had data both in Brooklyn and on these piers about traffic, pedestrian, and so on. And I hope you keep us up to date on that. I think we'd like to see some of that data. Not all of us walk by that every day, and it will help us understand more what the issues are, although I think we have a pretty good idea of what the conflicts are. But the volume of traffic and the way your staff keeps the north-south traffic separated from the east-west traffic, I mean bikes and pedestrians and passengers, would be helpful in our deliberations. And finally, I know that we have not talked about shore power in this question because we're really talking about the apron, but your slides did begin to show some preliminary stuff about shore power, and I'm kind of confused and hope that you'll spend a moment helping me get unconfused about what the state of shore power is. I know you said that the containers for shore power were not yet fixed in your minds, but when do we see shore power? What's the process? How much do you know about? How close is the load report that you said Con Ed needs? Like that. Fill that out for us a bit, would you?
Sure. So the feasibility study was like doing rate analysis, what kind of technologies there, but also understanding the kinds of ships that are arriving and what kind of vessels are docking at what pier, looking at various combinations of what if we bring one of the berths online versus all 3 berths online with shore power. We need to have this combination in place just to understand, should Con Edison only provide us with limited energy, what would be the best berth space to be energized or have shore power. Ideally, we would like to have all of them shore power. That's what we are planning for. The load report is the final step in this study where Con Edison it's a whole process of obtaining this information. We are working with them very closely, try to expedite it as quickly as possible, but as them reviewing, looking at all the ship calls that are planned that are currently coming. We've taken 2023 ship calls data to be more recent, and the size of the ships, where their shore power hatches are located, et cetera, and what kind of load that we would need to berth a 3 power. It's now them reviewing and understanding what that would look like and what kind of impact it would have on the grid. We do have an outlet coming into Pier 90. Would that suffice? Or do we need another transformer someplace? Once we have a clear understanding of that, then we will try to look at the options that you just saw, the container transformers that can be placed on pier, and where we would be locating it so that it is versatile in a way where you have a glimpse of the trench management that you just saw on the near apron. So regardless where the ship's hatch is located, we should be able to connect to them. So this is one of the issues that we have in Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, because we have what is known as a fixed cable positioning device. The ship has to line up exactly where the cables are for it to connect. If it's off, we cannot. We do have a problem where one of the vessels does not connect to the shore power. Because it was a state of art at the time it was built, it was specifically built for a class of vessel that still connects. Other ships going to Brooklyn, their hatches are not within the reach of that cable and not able to connect. So these are the things that we are working on and get clarity on as we move forward with our plan. We do have the feasibility study, and I'll be happy to, at some point, maybe the next turn around, come back and present you with a PowerPoint presentation that kind of talks about the cost analysis, what kind of NOx and SOx savings by tons that would happen once we go shore power, and all the benefits that, with the decarbonization and the reducing the footprint of carbon, et cetera. So we've done a really in-depth study on what it would look like if we had shore power for Manhattan Cruise Terminal. But the important piece is, how does it impact the grid? And during peak hours, like during summer when there's peak consumption, is there what would be the energy that's available for us to shore power? And how do we manage that? Connecting ships versus not connecting ships is a great option. So even if it means connecting fewer ships or having one berth connect, like all the ships that is larger in size connect versus some ships that are just hoteling for a few hours, not connect. And we're looking at all these combinations to make sure that we get the right solution and the best plan in place.
There are a couple of things that you said I think are interesting, and I appreciate you saying them. The containers that we saw are containers so that they can be moved along the apron for those ships whose shore power equipment is in different places.
Those are like the transformers. So energy comes in a certain kilowatt per hour, but it needs to be transformed into what the ship needs. So it could be 6 kilowatts versus 11 kilowatts, depending on what kind of system the ships have. And the transformers will
usually 11 or 6, right?
Yeah.
11
the
kV or
transformer,
6.
Yeah, 11 or 6 kV. And then
Yeah.
there's certain power factors that is needed by the vessel. So these transformers will balance that load. So it's like it's really high energy and it's a whole process. And so these transformers basically will convert that flow of energy going into the vessel to what they need for them to safely transfer the energy onto the ship and go into turn off their auxiliary engines.
I think what he was asking those to do is so the power gets converted in those transformers to what the ship needs, then goes under the trenching chase run there.
Correct.
And then will get fed to the water to the berth side, and then be connected with a sawtooth connection box that we would use like a mobile cable placement device to reach to the ship. But the containers themselves would not be gantryed or moved alongside the ship. They'd be fixed.
Right. The containers support the drop down station. So in Brooklyn, there's an entire section of the warehouse that supports that. We don't have that floor space at Pier 90. So the alternative is to store that in containers, similar to what you saw in those photos. That one photo that was kind of that to the right that somebody had asked about was a more artistic substation. And I think that was from Germany. So the idea is the power would come from Con Edison to that. And where that goes is to be determined, whether it goes on the roof or it's a standalone system where it creates a canopy. We haven't determined the best spot for that yet.
Thank you for all that. You're helping me anyway, and I presume the rest of us. We have been arguing, all of us, with Leslie making the most noise of anybody, and for shore power, and that's been going on for a long time. And it's simple for a community person like ourselves to be saying, give us shore power, and you're telling us how complex it really is to do that. And that's good information for us. In what you were just telling us a few seconds ago, the determination of load and whether or not you can have 1 or 3 piers provided with shore power. This isn't going to surprise you, but I have no doubt that our committee will be satisfied with nothing less than shore power at all 3 piers, and even at the most demanding periods of time in the summer, because those vessels, when they're not on shore power, are impacting our community in a seriously negative way. So here that we want 3, and we're going to be arguing, I believe the committee is going to be arguing for that as we move forward.
I hear you. That's our plan. We want all the piers to be shore power ready. And then based on what kind of load we receive, there is another room for us to kind of strategically manage our traffic. But, we'll wait. Initial goal is to get all the 3 piers lined up where they can have shore power capabilities for our vessels to coming in. So as 2028 comes in, we'll only be allowing ships that have shore power to come in. But once we have those data points in place and we get to a place where the next step in the process is what does it look like, and the planning process, and what what system works the best for us and go through that RFP process, we'll keep you in the loop and keep you updated.
You may not want to do this, but if in peak periods Con Edison can't provide the power that you require, you may have to say that one of the piers won't be used.
Yeah. Right, so.
I know that's a financial issue, but the community, the pollution in the community is a financial issue for us.
Yeah, but like you just heard Steve say, that the cruise lines are committed too, so they're doing a lot of stuff on their end as well with controlling, like, looking at synthetic fuel, they're looking at scrubbers, looking at alternative fuel components when they're hoteling and things like that. So it's in their best interest too. It kind of works for them as well. So we'll see from now until when we are ready for shore power, there might be new invention, new discoveries coming in, new technology that would reduce. There's already like the scrubbing system, and then there is like catalytics that catches the SOx. There is a new system that has been tested. I've been speaking to companies that is using limestone to channel all the exhaust to go through the limestone, and it converts into, it catches all those. It's like interesting, a new Kickstarter companies out there that are trying to come up with innovative ideas. So we are also exploring from our side. We're not just limiting ourselves to shore power. We are also looking at what else is there that we can utilize.
That's really fascinating. Does that mean that you're going to be doing some emissions testing of vessels that come in?
Yeah, I'm also currently looking at trying to install air monitoring devices to our piers. So stay tuned. I'll keep you updated as and when I have more information. I'm working on trying to get equipments installed in both of our terminals, so we have real-time data of what the emissions are we looking at when the ships are there and when the ships are not there, and have like a really on-point comparison. But I'm in the initial phases of looking at what kind of devices would be appropriate for us, and I'll keep you posted as I make progress.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have a few questions, but Marty actually, Marty brought a tear to my eye. Thank you, because you had all my questions, you pretty much hit. Because I gotta tell you, EDC, a big fear of mine personally, and I think of the committees, is that we have ships that are ready to plug in and there's no plug for them to plug in, and there's only one apron available, and that would be the biggest of disasters. But I just want, what's the breakdown of costs? And this is maybe for Ports of America, how much, the apron and what and who's paying for what? I'm just curious.
So I'll let Steve jump in it. You'll be surprised to know that the whole apron extension is fully funded by Ports America.
Okay, and the building too? They're all
No.
already.
So just to give you some details on it, the estimated, and we're not completely, at 100% and got our firm bid packages going out. None of that is done yet, but our estimate today is for the apron work, the construction of the apron, the boarding bridges, and all the other associated equipment to build the berth out is about $80 million. And that is funded, 80 million. And that is funded entirely by Ports America. And then there's EDC's pile rehabilitation project. I don't know the cost of that. And then there's the interior improvements, which again, we're still awaiting schematic design and initial estimates. And that we'd have to work through between Ports America, EDC, and the cruise lines, a mechanism for funding that.
And how, so we don't even know what the interior, first, let me ask you first, is that mostly aesthetic? The piles, separate the piles. Is that mostly aesthetic? Because when we walk through, it's obviously dated and old, or is it something more than
Well,
that?
I mean, there is aesthetics, but there's also quite a bit of construction, right? You've got customs CBP requirements that will inevitably drive the cost, and we're going to be recapturing some space on the check-in level at the upper level, which would involve essentially blowing out the south side interior walls all the way out to the water's edge. Other improvements to the HVAC systems and energy improvements, etc. It's going to be a big price tag. I don't know the number, but it's going to be a big.
And when is that negotiation happening, or is it happening right now?
Once we receive the schematic design initial estimates, we'll share it with the cruise lines and EDC and start working through it.
Okay, that's great, because it'll be interesting, and, because obviously when that starts, EDC we would love to know about, those plans as well, because I'm sure we'll have some environmental comments just for that, not the apron. Also, I'm just curious, why this apron? Is it because it's also gonna be part of the building? I know you have other aprons, but is this the apron for shore power because it's just gonna be one big continuous project, I guess, because of the interior?
So that's, we are limited with how many aprons we have and how many ships can dock side by side. So Pier 90 apron was underutilized, and then we saw potential of bringing in modern vessels. It's not so that I don't think the apron extension is gonna increase the footfall or traffic by much, but it'll allow for, bring New York in line with the other piers that are out there that line up with the new modern vessels. Like Steve mentioned several times, a really great experience, just like how our airports keep developing and allowing for a great experience when you travel, and in line with New York City's theme that we are one of the best cities in the world, and we could not have a pier that has not been renovated or touched, and it makes a really hard turnaround, which means when the ship docks, it's really a challenge to get those passengers on and off and have a seamless customs and border protection inspection in those areas.
So it was the worst pier. You're saying it's probably out of all of them, it was the worst one. It was the most.
Yeah, it was the
Okay.
that was the only option that we really have that we can extend given the distance between the two piers, the depth, and all kind of stuff that we looked into.
And the pile rehab that EDC is taking on the full cost of, what is that?
That is a continuous process. It's not
Oh, is that
nothing
yearly?
it is a year-round process. It's nothing to do with the apron extension per se, because it happens, all of our marine waterfronts needs constant repairs for the piles.
Good. Thank you. I think Marty covered all my shore power questions. Anyone else? We can wrap this up and we can discuss if we want to send a letter or not, but we really appreciate you guys. I mean, like I said, this last year, it's like the best relationship ever.
Absolutely.
With EDC. So we really appreciate it. So thank you guys. I know, we're always in contact anyway, but two things. One, since you are expecting this, the Con Ed load report soon, I guess that's when we would want, a report from you guys, and I would expect that would be our bigger letter, when we get the load report, then we'll know all the, what can be placed where, and, so I expect,
So I was a little bit ahead of this game already, and the company that we engaged has prepared a deck for us. But once I have all the information nicely tied up, I can come back and present it to you. I can actually have a subject matter expert come with me and present it to you on what the findings are and what we're thinking to do. Again, once we are all at a place where we can start now looking at what is the right fit, right budget, where the funds are going to come, or have you, then and then the timeline of it when we're looking to put the RFP out and do the construction and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and the second thing is also what you were just saying, which is interesting about the negotiations on that interior. Who's paying for what that's gonna be, what that's gonna look like. I think that's maybe next year sometime, right? Or down the line a little bit, but obviously we would be very interested in that. And then the third thing, which we're never gonna give up, is 92. So, and I think you said you were in this
As-
final thing for that too, of the.
As you should
right?
not. Yeah, it is a very, it's a nice space. It's a really great real estate. I would love to use it for, as soon as I can, but, we have to wait for all the safety concerns to be addressed, and then, we can move forward with it.
Great. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, really.
Thanks,
My
everybody.
pleasure. Yeah,
Bye.
thanks for having us. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.
So we don't have anything else on the agenda, but Janine tells me that Parks is here just to give us an update. Before we do that, I just want to throw it out to the committee. If you think there should be a letter, if it should, what are you envisioning? I expect a letter, not necessarily tonight, but I think they're gonna come back in January when they get the load letter and when they get the whole Con Ed. And that's maybe when we could do our bigger letter, but if we do want to do a shorter letter, explain about the transportation, or we can put it all in when we get the shore power, results. Should we wait for
What
January?
if you sent an administrative letter, just thank you for the presentation, we anticipate sending another letter when we
The
hear
bigger
more
one.
about this from in January. So at least we acknowledge that they were here and they told us some stuff and they know we're not just sleeping on it. And that's an administrative letter, so we
Yeah.
don't even need to vote on it.
Like a thank, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I do think when they, come back with the load report.
But I think they need to know that when they come back, they can't just show a drawing and have people walking on the highway.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no thought.
I think that's
I got the message.
Well, we saw them many times.
Yeah, but we brought it up so many times.
So
we
many
still get
times.
these-
Again, if they did it in January, we'll memorialize it in writing.
Yeah.
We've been telling them this so many times and they don't hear us.
So do you guys remember when the last time
We'll quote Brad.
they were here and they had the, oh, this is the new agreement and these are the 6 points. One of the points was to take a look at the transportation. I don't think they use infrastructure, but they use the word like that. Transportation and disembarking, embarking, and fix it or, reformat it. And when we asked them, like, what does that mean? Is that like a big thing? Like, are you taking the buses away or the small thing where you're just gonna like kind of now make? So they said they didn't know. And I think that's more, we want to bring our transportation committee in for that specific. I think they would be better at that. And I've talked to, Christine and Jesse, just maybe they could take that over because they would be experts on that part of it. So, but yes, we will put in our letter also when we do the big letter, but is everyone okay with Lowell's suggestion?
Yeah. I would say while the ship is down, they need to pay.
Oh, sorry.
When the ship's down, the fund shouldn't lose money. They need to step up and, okay.
Oh, they said, I think they said.
They said they'll look at it, yeah.
They're gonna look at it for the first
Yeah.
year, at least 2024, it won't be, if there is.
He gave us full projections in the money.
Yeah, but he said for 2024, if they are down, it'll be negligible, like, he said 2025, they have to
My
look at.
point is though, they charge everybody $2 during the off.
So it's funny, I think Raul, and my memory, I'm actually impressed, asked them that last time, or maybe it was you, Matt, it was one of you two, who asked them if there was a dip into the expected funds, and he said, no, that will be made up, it will be filled.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was fixed. We should make that note into our next letter and ask, or we can ask them offline, have you give us a
I
little
also think,
detail on that?
our council member should be all over this. With the account, this is direct money it's gonna distribute.
100%.
Like,
We've
Eric
already,
should be
yeah,
all over this.
yeah, I mean, this is like.
It's like he's getting a
It's
high
a big-
pole.
it is, it's a big windfall for a very small area of
That he can.
our neighborhood.
And just one other thing, just because I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle, and maybe it doesn't need to go into the administrative letter, but sort of that space that they're looking at reopening, that needed to look to see what kind of.
Oh, Pier 88,
Yeah, just that,
yes.
right,
So that was when we went on our tour. Remember Katie Savage actually said, why is this cut off?
right.
And they said the overhang now, there's some structural, and I think That was in a few months, I think that, engineering analysis, they said, so maybe they can come back with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it can go into our other letter, I guess. I just want to make sure, yeah.
Noted,
just follow
yeah.
up on that one. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
So-
moving
This is
to the
the administrative
administrative.
letter, we have to keep it basic.
Yeah.
You know, I think he's saying to just not let it get lost.
Yeah, so when we do a
talk
larger
about-
letter, I guess, we just.
Okay. Yeah, we have all our notes.
How
More
much
notes?
of what we heard today should be in the administrative letter? Shouldn't we memorialize most of what we heard and say, thank you for making that presentation? And that,
Yeah, I
and
think-
do that, is that an administrative letter?
It's no longer an administrative letter if you do it that way, Mark.
I think we're just gonna say thank you, we understand that there are timelines, you know, whatever the basics are, and that we expect, when EDC comes back, I think probably not January, probably February, in 2 months, that we'll see the bigger picture, and that's gonna be our big letter, Marty, at least as I think.
So this letter says, thank you for making the presentation, and the letter that comes in January or February reiterates much of what we heard tonight, plus what we learned then.
Yeah, I mean, we look forward to seeing what the results are gonna be. I mean, that's, you know, it's kind of open until
We're gonna
then,
bury you in 2 months, not now.
yeah.
I mean, that logo
Okay.
obviously is going to be very important in terms of them figuring out whether they can run three piers at the same time.
It'll be interesting to see the findings for sure. Ginny, I think you said Paul from Parks is here?
Yeah, so Paul had to leave. He said his computer was shutting down, but he sent an email with his updates. I forwarded it to you.
Okay. Oh, you forwarded to me?
Yeah.
Okay. Paul lost service, okay. There you go, updates. You know what, he can add, oh, yeah, we know that. I'll read his updates. The new volunteer initiative, Let's Go New York, focuses on capturing information regarding volunteer efforts, not part of Partnership for Parks or other organized volunteer efforts. The gardeners at Hell's Kitchen and DeWitt, who work very independently, are akin to the volunteer efforts we are looking at. For the time being, I am asking volunteers to email me directly with their park volunteer activity. So that's that. I guess that's what he wanted, right? On the Let's Go New York, Let's Go NYC.
Yes.
And the other one is what I guess we'll move to new business, old business, but we are very happy to announce with the Penn South Playground, and I guess it was announced when we were at full board. Before our letter even went out officially, we were talking with them offline as well. And they took into suggestion, Brad, you'll be happy, we are keeping the 3 courts and we are keeping the sway fund. So I think this is a real big win. There's also one other thing that Lowell and Sal will be very happy about, but I'll tell you why this is a great win, and it's I think a really good example, I think for Board 4 overall, is because we painstakingly were sitting here for an hour trying to figure out what would be the best, you know, are we gonna get rid of a court? Are we gonna keep the special equipment? And we finally came together on something, and we gave them a solution that we thought would work and hope they can do it. And they actually did, and they called me, they're like, guess what, you got it, we redesigned it, and we're gonna keep this way. So I think that's I think it's a testament to how this committee is working, you know, this past year, it's really great. And also, Lowell, do you want to announce?
They're keeping the 7-foot
They're
fence.
putting in the 7-foot fence. So
And
now,
I'm going right back to them.
we'll see that, I was
You
gonna
can
say
ask them
that.
to raise the fence at the 22.
Yeah, well, not only is that a really, really big win now, because we've been talking about it at other parks, but it sets a precedent that I think we can always now go back to, saying we did it here, and this is great.
Well, that's why we did it at,
Yeah.
Snow Park, the Snow Park Arena.
Yeah, so I think it's really good, so everyone should pat themselves on the back before they leave the meeting tonight. And I think that includes Lisa, David, and Marty, who are on Zoom as well. We see you. Thank you, guys.
I have 2 things I'd like to bring up.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
One is the composting. I'm wondering if we get clarification on the composting, because there are all of these city composting, stations or whatever, that are now not gonna be used.
Community composting.
Right.
Mhm.
So there is a nonprofit that built the composting as well. And my partner who built the composting thinks like, why let these these, I don't know what you call them, these boxes or whatever, just sit there. Why not have a nonprofit come in and see if they can use those, to just keep the program going?
So there's a nonprofit called Grow NYC, I believe it is, and they were the ones that were losing their funding. And they were losing a lot of their funding. So we're talking now about the community composting, not the orange bins that you see. And we think, I mean, no one has said that maybe a lot of the decision of the city to cut the community composting funds is because now we have all of these bins around the city that are, you can easily go, you can dump your compost in. But that being said, I think, if anyone knows, correct me if I'm wrong, Grow NYC announced recently that they have a private donor
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
a philanthropist
Funding.
for a year. I think it's for this next year to hopefully fill a gap. So the immediate problem of community composting going away has been solved, but not the problem of the city funds for it. It's now a private donation.
It's a donation.
So, so we will keep community composting, or at least Grow NYC will keep their community composting. And we do still have, obviously, it just started the bins, the citywide composting program. So for now, because we were thinking of having Grow NYC come and we would write a letter in support, but right now they're just gonna kind of put a pause on it now that they can do it for another year.
Right.
But that brings me to something actually that I wanted to talk about. We have been trying, Jesse, and I know Janine, and we won't get too deep into it, but I do want to alert the committee that now that DSNY is under our purview, we have been asking them specifically about the syringes. I don't know if anyone remembers, we wanted them to come to give a little presentation, or at least hear of some of our concerns of syringes in the parks that we're seeing in certain parks in particular. So unfortunately, the last 2 months, DSNY has not been able to provide a representative to come to a CB meeting or WPE meeting because they said that that would be considered overtime. And they are not approved to come to night meetings. And if we had our meetings during the day, then maybe they could come. And we said, well, aren't all community board meetings at night? So anyway, we're trying to have some, and I think it's more Jesse and Janine in the office is going to contact DSNY to see how we can rectify the situation where we can actually.
Paid by salary?
Yeah.
So we want
they have-
somebody in management.
So that's another point. The person, as you know, we're very lucky and spoiled with parks. We get Steve Simon, he's the chief of staff to the Manhattan Borough, Parks Commissioner. The best, the great, it's right to the, right there.
Yeah.
With other agencies, DOE is different. DSNY comes like with a community liaison and then brings back our requests or our concerns. So we're hoping, as Brad said, instead of having that person, can we get someone in management that can actually not only listen to our problems, but give some feedback on the spot of why things are going or not going. So I just want you guys to be aware that we are working on that very hard and we're not like just saying, oh, forget about it. We're trying to.
They did come about the fines for dog waste?
Dog poop? I think that was their
No.
representative. It wasn't management. That was their liaison.
That was a waste.
When I
No.
first heard it, I was I got pissed off, and I really appreciate the way you, Leslie, and Jesse have been sort of nice talking to try and get around it. I mean, you can't just get it by screaming at them, which I felt like doing.
So I do have one other thing. I
Yes,
think I
go ahead,
told you
I'm sorry.
a while ago. We're the environment committee, right? And we just sold this report in terms of what our neighborhoods look like in terms of level of pollution. And as a car owner, I don't use the car. I only see my mom. It's my father's jalopy. It has 200,000 miles on it. So, okay, so.
I'd love to apologize.
So,
It's okay.
so I have this whole thing, so I do alternate side parking, and the thought occurred to me, that the machines go by, maybe not, but they go by, and then people are still sitting in their cars when it's hot and cold. Hundreds and thousands of cars are idle.
Yes, waiting to move the car.
So my idea is, why don't we just use technology, put a little something on the street sweeper and also interface with the parking attendant. So then like you could just leave your damn car and not have it idle.
For 3 hours.
Yeah, for 2 hours. What's that?
The Ubers, they just said we don't need, they're all circling around.
That's another, but that's another.
That's an
problem.
innovation that we're gonna like,
Ubers are-
come into the city at all, but this is something, I think it's not a hard reach in terms of the technology. And I know the city gets money over the parking tickets and so forth, but I think the amount of exhaust that is in it's unacceptable, and we have, this could be a low hanging fruit in terms of doing something about it.
I can talk to Jesse, because I don't wanna cross over into transportation if it's,
Yeah.
you know, and we can either do it with them or hand it to them, and they might have some good, I don't know, maybe they have heard it in their, is anyone here on transportation? Or maybe they have heard it in their committee before, so I can pass it over to Jesse.
Yeah, sometimes transportation, they're not in favor of cars, so they're, make it as difficult as possible for cars to drive, the whole
Yeah.
history behind that. But I very strongly in environmental
Absolutely, yeah.
Position.
It's kind of like,
ridiculous.
don't let perfect be the enemy of the, wait.
Yeah.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Correct, right, okay. I saw that email too, and I think I did send it to Jesse, but we can revisit. Yeah. Anyone else before we, wrap up the meeting?
You get out and fight over your spot too, people sliding in on you.
Yes.
Should be anger training along with environmental.
Can't fight someone, they let the air out of your life.
Yeah.
I think you're stuck in here.
All right, any, motion to, thank you, second, great, thank you guys, wait, no letters? Oh, administrative. Thank you guys, I'm sure, Lisa, David, and Marty, we'll talk.
Yeah.
Happy holidays.
Give you a call
Happy
tomorrow.
holidays, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.